our must-adds before Week 13, Thanksgiving week of the NFL season. What's going on, football fans and fantasy freaks? It's Mitch here, back with another must-adds video. My 10 favorite ads this NFL week. There's only 2 weeks remaining in the regular season. It's the final playoff push. Week 14 is a critical week. There are plenty of bye weeks in Week 14. It resembles what we just saw in Week 12. So you have to be prepared with depth to fill those positions in the critical game and the critical week that could make you a playoff team or not, a bye week or not. So scan your league, make sure that, hey, some great players weren't dropped already, but if there's no one out of the ordinary hanging on your waiver wire, these are the players to attack at running back, wide receiver, and tight end. Gronk, spike the like button, and don't forget to subscribe to OwnersBox Fantasy. Let's begin with the running back position that for a while has felt stale on the waiver wire. But this week, with perfect timing, the running back position is kind of interesting. Amir Abdullah is going to be the first player I want to discuss. Abdullah was the primary back for the Raiders in their game against the Broncos. He saw the football 13 times, 13 touches against a good Broncos defense. And overall, he looked slippery, he looked quick, he looked elusive, and he looked down to down as the Raiders' most competitive running back. Now, the problem with Abdullah is that on Black Friday, he's going to be taking on the Chiefs, who are one of the best run defenses in the sport. And let's face it, with Desmond Ridder at quarterback, there's not going to be a lot of upside to any Raider that you start outside of possibly Brock Bowers, but that's about it, right? So Abdullah is not a perfect play, but if you're desperate, and especially into the future, like Week 14 specifically, because this week you shouldn't have anybody on a bye week, so you should have your main roster intact. It's more for Week 14 looking forward. Amir Abdullah, 8 attempts, 28 rushing yards, but where I really like him is in PPR formats. He catches the ball well. He's always been a third down running back, shifty in space, a good route runner. He's a contributor on special teams, 5 catches, 37 yards, and a receiving touchdown as well. So he's somebody that in PPR, full PPR formats, I think he's actually a better play and a better addition to your roster. The next running back is a similar type and style of player, the satellite back, right? Like the James White-esque type player, Jeremy McNichols of the Washington Commanders. 3 attempts, 22 yards in the game against the Cowboys. But we've seen McNichols actually have some really good outings this season, just in terms of when he gets the football, he looks explosive, he looks elusive, he looks just like a dynamic runner that deserves more opportunity. But because Austin Eckler and Brian Robinson have been in front of him, he hasn't seen a lot of the football. That being said, Eckler got injured on like the last play of the game or one of the final plays of the game against the Cowboys. It was really unfortunate, okay? And then Robinson also got injured in that game and left the game. So McNichols is the next man up. He could be the lead back for the Commanders in their next game, which is going to be a huge game because they need to start winning games. I think they've lost like 3 games in a row at this point. So McNichols, he's quick, he's shifty. I don't think he's somebody that is going to, let's say, carry the load for an offense. He's not going to be a workhorse for a running game. But considering that Washington's run game is excellent this year, highly efficient, any running back in this backfield that's going to see 10 to 15 touches, which is probably what McNichols is going to see in the upcoming week or two, he's definitely worth a pickup and definitely somebody worth spending some fab on because he's definitely a flex type of play. With how explosive he's been with the limited touches just last week, 3 for 22, it's worth the addition on your roster. Tank Bsby is a name that should be owned in a majority of competitive fantasy leagues, but in some leagues that are a little bit thinner or have thinner rosters, Tank Bsby is probably available. I wanted to throw him out there. Jacksonville's coming off a bye. there is the potential that because Bsby was injured, that he still remains on the waiver wire even in maybe competitive leagues. Plus, Mac Jones being the quarterback has not allowed Jacksonville to move the ball or sustain drives, which also really hurt them. So Bsby, he's the best pure runner on Jacksonville. Travis Etienne or no Travis Etienne, Bsby is the better pure runner of the football. If you need a running back, you could do worse, in my opinion, than Tank Bsby. Off of the bye week, rested. He should be back. He should return. He's somebody that's going to see probably a split in his backfield, but he has been really, really good when he's been on the field in 2024. Gus Edwards is the final running back addition that I would consider entering week number 13. Gus Edwards is in a good offense with the Chargers. He's familiar with the scheme under Greg Roman, many years playing in Baltimore, and he's seen a good share of touches over the last couple of weeks with even J.K. Dobbins having as good of a season as he is. And they've even tried to throw and make Haskins a thing in the backfield as well, because he's, of course, a Michigan man. And Harbaugh does have a tendency to favor his Michigan men. But that being said, Gus Edwards, he finished with only 11 yards on 9 carries against the Ravens, his former team. It was not a revenge game against the Ravens for Gus Edwards, but you saw that immediately as soon as J.K. Dobbins went down and he left that game around halftime, that Edwards became the lead ball carrier, and it wasn't really particularly close in terms of usage. So Edwards is known for his short yardage ability, his red zone ability, and he's a guy that definitely can take 20 carries in a game if need be. Like even last year with the Ravens, he was their lead ball carrier. So now with the Chargers, you could see him be the guy in that backfield if Dobbins misses time. They play the Falcons as well, who are a pretty easy matchup, in my opinion. The Chargers should be able to sustain a running game in that game and also have the lead against a bad defense and a mid team. So I expect the Chargers to get back on the winning side next week, making Gus Edwards a pretty interesting start for next week if Dobbins misses out. Wide receiver position. There's plenty of guys that I think you could throw up here. Nick Westbrook-Ikhine is somebody that I'm just going to not ignore anymore. Like, I think he's been a solid player throughout his NFL career. He's had fantasy relevancy in the past. I've even started him in a couple of my lineups in years past. But this year, he has 6 touchdowns in the last 7 games. Like, it's impossible to ignore at this point. Now, the weird thing, and the reason I haven't brought him up in these videos previously, is because he only has 17 catches during that stretch. He only has 17 catches, but he has 6 touchdowns. That's insane. I don't know how he's going to keep that pace up, but if he just keeps scoring touchdowns, he's a weekly start at this point, right? And the thing I've realized is maybe Tennessee really liked what they saw out of Westbrook-Ikhine during training camp, during the season, and they felt like DeAndre Hopkins was definitely somebody they could sell and get rid of. And I think he's been outperforming Tyler Boyd as well. So I feel like the Titans, with Will Levis continuing to play better and better and better the last couple of weeks, the way that Will Levis plays, he's a downfield striker at the quarterback position in terms of he's going to throw the deep ball, he's going to uncork it. And Westbrook-Ikhine, he's a big target. He'll go up, he'll moss a cornerback in the red zone, and he's become Will Levis's favorite target in the red zone and, in that range to get a touchdown. So Westbrook-Ikhine, not a guy that's going to see a ton of volume, but you could do worse in terms of a boom or bust play, considering he has 6 touchdowns in 7 games, and he's always had talent, in my opinion. Devon Vele of the Denver Broncos is the next name. He's coming off single game highs with the Broncos in targets with 9 and receiving yards with 80. Denver has a game against Cleveland on Monday Night Football, and then they have a bye in week 14. So he's a little bit less valuable in my opinion because you probably don't need him for week 13, but you would like to have him in week 14. But the thing that's just been constant with him is he's consistently involved in the offense week after week after week. I think 4 out of the last 5 weeks, he has 10 plus PPR fantasy points, like full PPR fantasy points. He has 10 points in the last 4 or 5 games. The last month, he's been a target machine. He's been a consistent chain mover. He's involved in the RPO game significantly, and he largely plays in the middle of the field. He's dangerous with the ball in his hands, and he's a bigger target. He's about 6'5". He's a big receiver that can run and can move. So Sean Payton has found some usage for him. It's an awkward receiving core because outside of Cortland Sutton, they've kind of found like, okay, they're going to use certain guys in certain situations, and it's hard to really understand who's the next man up there. but it does feel like we may have a new wide receiver 2 in Denver, and there's enough usage to kind of get familiar with who that is, okay? Adam Thielen is next up. The man, the myth, the legend has returned. Adam Thielen, 3 catches for 57 yards against the Kansas City Chiefs, a pretty solid defense. He did also draw a big pass interference. Adam Thielen is going to be one of the top 2 targets down the stretch for Bryce Young, a Bryce Young that's playing the best football of his career the last month or so. The Panthers offense is actually looking much better in terms of balance, much better in terms of moving the football consistently, drive to drive. They actually moved the ball really well against Kansas City. And Xavier Legette is going to be probably the more explosive, big-time option. But Thielen could become the chain mover for Bryce because that's what he was in 2023, catching 103 passes for this offense in 2023. Thielen can still ball because he's experienced. He's got great awareness, great understanding of where to be against zone coverage, and he looked decent just in terms of being an addition to the Panthers offense that's usable and somebody that can still run routes out there, still make big catches. So, this wasn't 3 for 9. This was 3 for 57. I think it's time to take notice with Adam Thielen and the Panther offense. The final wide receiver I would add for week 13 is Marquise Valdes-Scantling, MVS, kind of like Nick Westbrook Akine, Marquise Valdes-Scantling, my goodness, the names, all name team. MVS has been limited opportunity, limited catches, but big-time explosion. And that makes sense with MVS because he's always been a vertical threat, a downfield receiver, and a speedster. But the weird thing about him with the Saints is a lot of his catches have turned into big yak plays for Derek Carr and touchdowns. 5 catches, 3 touchdowns with the Saints. 5 catches, 3 touchdowns. That's crazy. That's Randy Moss on Thanksgiving type numbers. 196 yards in only 2 games played with the Saints and Derek Carr. So to me, he's in the rotation of receivers. He's been the most explosive. He's been the most consistent over the last 2 games making plays. And outside of Taysom Hill, Taysom Hill and Alvin Kamara, there are not a lot of receivers in this offense, not a lot of playmakers in this offense. MVS seems to be the next man up, at least in terms of giving them an element like Rashid Shaheed was bringing before. A big play receiver, right? And Derek Carr seems to be taking advantage of MVS's speed. So he's definitely worth an addition, a boom or bust option coming up this NFL season. At tight end, Zach Ertz. I believe I brought up multiple times in multiple videos before, but he has actually been really good for fantasy this year. And I've thought that Zach Ertz was washed probably about 5 times during his NFL career, but he just continues to do it. I think at this point, man, I think he is a borderline Hall of Fame tight end. Like, I don't think Zach Ertz really gets known or regarded in that manner, but I mean, he's not playing at that level right now, but just in terms of his career legacy, this is a side point. I think Zach Ertz is like a borderline Hall of Fame tight end. I mean, he was great at his peak, and he's still getting it done, near his 40s. Zach Ertz ran the most routes among all Commanders pass catchers on Sunday against Dallas, and he saw the second most targets with 8. Ertz has been seeing a ton of receptions weekly. I mean, he has a great floor. Every single week, it feels like he catches at least 4 passes from Jaden Daniels. He's a chain mover on third down. He's become a red zone weapon, and he's become deadly in garbage time for the Commanders. The last couple of weeks, he's been absolutely impeccable in garbage time against the Eagles and the Cowboys. So Zach Ertz is the garbage time master. Sign him up for a tight end spot on your team if you're in need of Zach Ertz. Noah Gray is the final player I want to discuss that you must add for week 13 because he has 4 touchdowns in the last 2 games. And at tight end, when you have 2 back-to-back 2-touchdown games, you take notice because this position is so unreliable, so inconsistent, and so lacking explosion that somebody like Noah Gray is definitely needed. He actually has ran the 4th most routes of any Chiefs receiver, wide receiver, or tight end, including Kelsey, including Worthy, including, Rashee Rice, including all these other guys, DeAndre Hopkins. Noah Gray is a relevant part of this offense, and because of all the attention that Kelsey soaks up in those 2 tight end formations, Gray oftentimes can showcase his separation and route running chops that are actually very deceptive, and he is a good red zone weapon for Mahomes. So Somebody that I actually picked up in leagues last week to start at tight end due to all the buys that were happening. And I think he's worth an add for, deeper leagues, for teams that need a tight end in week 14 potentially. So Noah Gray, my final must add of week 13. Those are my 10 favorite players to add entering week 13. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, spike the like button and don't forget to subscribe. We're switching it up this week on OwnersBox Fantasy instead of obviously the trades, with the trade deadline being probably over for 90% of leagues. We're going to be doing some stardom situm this week, so don't forget to subscribe for that upcoming video this week. Thank you so much for watching. It's Mitch. We'll see ya.